Well, it's been a couple weeks since I told the first story of the aftermath of when my first wife Jennifer passed away in a car accident, and the challenges I faced from my leadership, my battalion commander specifically. That story kind of resonated. I've gotten really wonderful feedback from everybody, and I really appreciate it. I thought it was time I should tell the rest of the story because the thing is, the rest of the story can give you hope because while I did deal with some very traumatic things and my direct leadership made it worse in many ways. The good news is I was also blessed to have incredibly good people surround me and take care of me. I think I mentioned how my good friends from high school growing up flew all the way down to or drove all the way down to Fort Campbell from St. Louis, Missouri to hang out with me. But it went on from there. Uh, I'll never forget, after that incident where I took the leave, I came back. I went to work, and I had to deal with a lot of things. We were only a month or so from giving birth when Jennifer was killed, and so we had an entire nursery of stuff, gifts we've been given, baby stuff. I just couldn't deal with it, and I remember earlier in the last time you remember, I may have mentioned, Major Bill Gillen was my boss, had been a former boss, and was the executive officer of my battalion at the time. His wife Cindy took it upon herself to handle it. She said, "I'll handle this, Fred." Cindy came in, packed up all of the baby stuff, and she drove it down to Toys R Us, which is at the time had been where they had Babies R Us, and that was where our baby registry was in Clarksville, Tennessee. Cindy took it down there, and where Jennifer's accident was only about a quarter of a mile from where Toys R Us was there in Clarksville. And the manager at Toys R Us, when she told him the story that who the stuff was for, he took it all. He took all the items; they'd all been unwrapped. Jennifer had taken all the clothes out and folded them over and over, waiting for the baby to come. And he took it all, and even stuff that wasn't carried by Toys R Us. And he gave her a giant check for the entire thing, which was incredible. Cindy, the heart of a military wife. The local community who'd heard what happened to Jennifer. It was a very significant thing in the community, and the way they wrapped their arms around me. As time went on, Christmas came. Christmas is coming. Jennifer loved Christmas. So I was struggled. I was having some sleepless nights. I hung around. The only bar that was open in Clarksville, Tennessee was called Cat West. It was open at 2 in the morning. You can guess what kind of bar it was. And that's where I hung out because they were up at 2 in the morning when I wasn't sleeping, and they all wrapped their arms around me. So the shift would come off at 2 a.m. and we'd go to the pancake house next door to have pancakes at 2:30 in the morning, and then I tried dragging myself to work the next day. And so, needless to say, a company commander of a 120-man soldier uh, company, um, sleeping in his car. It was not great stuff, but I was really lucky. As time going on, as we got closer to Christmas, things really were tough. I was having a very hard time commanding my company. I was struggling. I was butting heads with that battalion commander. I found out later that he had gone to our higher headquarters, our brigade commander, and gone to his office and said, "Hey, look, Wellman's having a tough time. He's not performing. I want to relieve of command." And I found out later the brigade commander, the full bird colonel, lit into him so loudly that the secretary could hear it outside, saying, "No, you're not firing the young man. You're not ruining his military career on top of his personal life, which has been ruined by the death of his wife and child. So, no, Colonel, you're going to turn out of my office. You're going to go down there and help that young man, and you're going to help him recover from all this." And so I only found out about that later. So things go ahead. I suppose around Thanksgiving or so. And one night we had a mission. And in the old days, the UH-60 Blackhawks were sort of known for not being terribly reliable. I mean, you have to be honest. The early 1990s, the Blackhawks were really struggling with the maintenance and the reliability. One challenge I always had was you would load the radios up with the codes, because we had these codes you had to load into them for secure communications, and they would dump them if it rained. It was incredibly frustrating. So one day we had an air assault to Fort Knox, Kentucky from Fort Campbell, and we were supposed to go on that certain day. I owned the Blackhawks in my organization. The command and control helicopter was mine, and which that time commander would fly in. And so the mission got canceled because of weather. And so I said to my guy, I said, look, we got enough wire to fly around the airfield. They said, yeah, we do. I said, do this. I said, load the aircraft with all the codes, all the crypto, um, get it all checked out, do the radio checks, do a couple flights around the pattern, make sure the aircraft's working. And so when you do take off the next day, that everything works. And they said, good to go. And they did. They were able to because the weather was good enough they could at least fly around the airfield. And so the next day I had quite a bit to do to include therapy at that point. I was going to some grief therapy. And so I said 7:30 at night. It's dark. I remember it was raining. It started raining at that point. I got a call to report to the hangar. And I get there, and the battalion commander I've been struggling to deal with, I was there. Um, and I guess things had gone awry, as things do. It did rain at some point, and the Black Hawk dumped its codes, and it caused all kinds of problem. And he was furious. And he calls me in. Now, he calls me in to the same room that 2 months earlier they had informed me of my wife's death in. And he sort of lights into me, as one does when his subordinate screws up. And at some point he says, what the hell's wrong with you? And I responded, it was you, which was inappropriate. Actually, we used much more colorful language. Um, and I could tell he was angry. He wanted to fire me, but I only found out later he couldn't. And this is where things changed. He says, Major Gillen. And he called Bill Gillen in. And the XO, he's XO, get in here. The XO came and goes, and he sits down. I remember sitting there staring at me across the desk. And he says, Captain Wellman is clearly struggling. I want you to figure out how we could take care of him. And the next day, Bill started making some calls, and then this is where love comes out, right? So the entire head of Human Relations Command, HRC for Aviation Branch, had been my battalion commander in Desert Storm, so he knew me. And he knew Jennifer. He had met Jennifer in Savannah when we were stationed in Savannah at the 24th ID. And so he knew about them. He knew about Jennifer. He knew what we were dealing with. He'd heard the stories that Jennifer had gotten killed. Bill started calling, and what can we do for Fred? Because things are a disaster here. And he called me up. He says, Fred, what's going on down there? And I said, it's fucking train wreck. I got to get out of here. And but at that point, unfortunately, I was 6 months into my company command. I don't want to get complicated Army stuff. But unfortunately, my official record would only show that I left my command early, and not why. It couldn't show why. It couldn't show that it had to do with my wife getting killed. So what this meant was that forever my permanent record would just say I left my job early in this mysterious gap. And you and I know how that works, right? When you see a mysterious gap on a record, you assume the worst. Oh, you got busted for something. And I'm like, damnedest thing, if HRC and Gillen and the brigade and even that lieutenant colonel I was dealing with came up with this crazy plan where I rolled out of the company command I was in without any records being taken that I'd had the job. So basically, we eliminated the job from ever having existed. Sent me to a 6-week school at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, which was just the perfect thing I needed to just go and go to a class that was essentially pass or fail, which I mostly drank through. It was great. And then I was reassigned to Hawaii, and I remember my boss from HRC call me up. He says, "Well, we can send you 2 places where there are scouts still, Port Hood and Hawaii." I'm like, that's tough. Where should I go? As it turned out, I got lucky because when I looked up who I knew in Hawaii, I didn't know anyone at the time, and it was truly a chance to start my life over again. So I went to school for 6 weeks, came back to Fort Campbell, packed all my stuff up, and I moved to Hawaii in April of 1995. Where I knew no one, and essentially started my life all over again, fresh. And then the last piece of good luck in the story I'll tell you is, I'd gone to Ranger School as a captain in 1993. Hadn't done me any good at that point. I'd gone to the armor course instead of the aviation course at Fort Knox, Kentucky. Hadn't done me any good at that point. and as it turns out, the commander at my new unit in Hawaii, 1st and 25th Aviation, a guy named Colonel Madden, he used to be a tanker. He was a ranger. And when he saw my record, when he heard I was inbound, I remember one of my friends told me later, he turned around, he got my officer brief and said, well, here's our next company commander. So when I got to Hawaii, they actually assigned me right away to command of a attack helicopter company, a UH-1 Cobra or H-1 Cobras and Scouts. I ended up flying all over Hawaii and started my life new. I actually met my second wife there and had two kids. I mean, the rest of the story will be, and maybe you'll hear it next time, is I went to Hawaii in April of 1994 as a single widower, and I returned 3 years later as a married father of four. Um, and so while the last story I told was gutting, the cruelties that some people can have when people are going through tough times, this story is really a lesson of how good people will come out of the walls for you. And you should be one of them because those little moments you make when Cindy Gillen went to Toys R Us for me, the one I mentioned last time where my financial planner um, paid all my bills for me, where my battalion commander was able to assign me to a place and basically restart my career from scratch, like a do-over. Those people kept me going when I thought I'd check out. And if it wasn't for those moments and those key moments, it was the moments when people helped me when I was struggling. I don't think I'd be here today. I can actually say confidently I wouldn't be here today. So be those guys, not that guy. Anyway, thanks.